Amid race card allegations, Pelosi teaches Ocasio Cortez a math lesson. Washington U as they feud publicly, freshman Republic. Alexandria, Pelosi has them and Ocasio Cortez does not. The more Ocasio Cortez, DNY, lashes out over the limits of her own influence, the more obvious those limits become and the more the imbalance tilts in the direction of Pelosi, D. California. After all, now, they're in the wake of her not-so-veiled allegation that Pelosi is discriminating against her clique, known as they. The idea struck much of Washington as so ridiculous that the list of Pelosi's defenders included not only a legion of congressional Democrats but also 1. Norton, 82, knows a thing or two about the obstacles young women of color face in society and politics. She attended segregated schools here, helped organize the 1963 Civil Rights March on Washington and served successively as the head of New York City's Civil Rights Commission and the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Ocasio Cortez said Friday that it is to say she played the race. She is surely right about one thing: Pelosi has made an example out of the squad and helped them isolate themselves from the rest of the Democratic caucus as a party of four. The reality is that the squad's influence in American politics is more than 4 votes in the House U, but less than its members seem to think. In late June, as Pelosi was trying to put together a spending package to provide resources to the U.S. border with Mexico, she made concessions to the Congressional Progressive Caucus, a much larger set of lawmakers that includes the squad. Pelosi didn't. Her negotiations with the Progressive Caucus proved fruitful with 4 glaring exceptions. When it came time, when Pelosi subsequently went ahead and put the Senate's version of the bill on the floor, against the wishes of progressives, it was harder to argue with the logic that she couldn't fully trust that votes would materialize if she tried to amend it first. In other words, the argument was progressives had only the squad to blame for the failure to get a more liberal border bill. Whether that's true, at the same time, Pelosi began publicly calling them out for stirring up dissent on social media but failing to turn online activism into voting power in Congress. All. Then, in a closed-door caucus meeting this past week, when Pelosi admonished lawmakers not to use social media to attack each other, there wasn't any question whom she was targeting. In a tweet just days earlier, Ocasio Cortez's chief of staff had accused modern Southern Democrats of being like segregationists of old. In the past, separately and collectively, the squad has gone to battle with fellow Democrats on political issues from primary elections to the influence of pro-Israel donors in American politics, as well as administrative matters such as the composition of House committees and policy issues like the situation on the border. To this point, Ocasio Cortez took particular umbrage at Pelosi's string of recent reprimands. When the back and forth between the high-profile lawmakers has touched off a firestorm within the Democratic caucus that pulls at virtually every thread of intersectionality, but the most commonly expressed sentiment is that Ocasio Cortez has crossed a lot of lines with a lot of lawmakers and has not shown her colleagues, including Pelosi, the kind of respect that she demands for herself. As for the question of whether Pelosi is discriminating against the squad on the basis of gender, seniority, and skin color, most Democrats find that absurd. Murphy, who often has clashed with Pelosi on policy and strategy, has found success in speaking the speaker's language by bringing votes along with her to force negotiations on particular points of disagreement and by trying to find solutions rather than simply blocking legislation. She explained that the tension between Pelosi and Ocasio Cortez has existed since before the latter was even sworn in, as they battled over a select committee on climate change. It was only a matter when she did. There were 227 Democrats Indiana her camp and 4 Indiana Ocasio Cortez's. That's the kind of raindrop, drop top, top smoking, no cooking the hot pot.
Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up